Hey everybody, it is Ball Game Productions, and I'm here to bring you 5 blockbuster trades the Portland Trail Blazers should make in order to keep Dame in Portland. So leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and make sure to comment whether you agree or disagree with my trade proposals. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so for my first trade proposal here, we have Portland receiving Ben Simmons, and the Philadelphia 76ers receiving CJ McCollum, Nasir Little, and a 2023 top 10 protected first round pick, and a 2022 second round pick. Alright, this trade would leave Portland with a starting roster of Damian Lillard at the 1, Norman Powell at the 2, Robert Covington at the 3, Ben Simmons at the 4, and Yusuf Nurkic at the 5. You'd have an alright bench with Anthony Simons, Tony Snell, Ben McLemore, Derrick Jones Jr., whoever we sign with the MLE. I'm thinking it might be Paul Millsap. He's a good option, even though he is pretty old, but he can provide a few minutes here and there to help out. And Tony Zeller at the backup 5. Now, I think this would be a great decision for Portland to make this trade, but I don't think it'd really happen just because of what Daryl Morey wants, and that is Damian Lillard, and I don't think Portland's quite ready to give up on him yet. So with this trade, Portland would get a lot better defensively, considering Ben Simmons is a DPOY candidate as of last year, and he's a great playmaker, and with Coach Chauncey Billups coming out saying that he doesn't want to shoot as many threes this year and thinks it's not necessary, Ben Simmons would be a great fit for that, considering he doesn't shoot any threes, and I think Chauncey could get the best out of Ben. But with that being said, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think that would happen, but here's why I think it would work out for Philadelphia. Alright, Philly's left with a starting lineup of CJ McCollum, Seth Curry, Danny Green, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid, with a bench of Tyrese Maxey or Seth Curry running the 1, Shake Milton, Nasir Little, Furkan Korkmaz, Matisse Thybulle, Anthony Tolliver, and Andre Drummond. Now, I think this would work out for Philly well because they need a player like CJ who can create his own shot and isn't afraid to shoot like Ben Simmons. I really think this is what Philly is missing, but I know Daryl Morey's asking price is a bit too high for Ben Simmons. I don't think this quite cuts it, but it is a realistic trade, I believe, for Ben Simmons. But with that being said, let's move on to trade number 2. Alright, so this trade relies on a lot of things like many trades, and that would be Brandon Ingram wanting out or New Orleans looking to move on from him and get a primary ball handler, which they could get, and CJ McCollum, who is a great ball handler who can create his own shot, and I think he'd fit great with Zion, but we'll get into that later. So in this trade, Brandon Ingram goes to Portland, and New Orleans gets CJ McCollum, Nasir Little, and a 2023 top 10 protected first round pick. Alright, so for Portland, not a lot changes from the last trade except you're exchanging out Ben Simmons and Brandon Ingram. I think this trade works out really well for the Blazers as they swap out CJ for a young, rising small forward in Brandon Ingram who can score the ball, facilitate, and while he's not the greatest defender, he has length on him, and that's a lot more important than what CJ brings to the table on defense. CJ's a little scrappy here and there, but just a bigger body out there would be more helpful for the Blazers, and I just think that with CJ and Norm in a 3-guard lineup, you're just not going to be able to do as much as you want, and there's definitely a ceiling on that, even if you bring in a new coach. So I think trading for Brandon Ingram would definitely help the Blazers improve their roster. Alright, and then for New Orleans, you're left with a starting lineup of CJ McCollum at the 1, Nickeil Alexander-Walker at the 2, Nasir Little at the 3, Zion Williamson at the 4, and Jonas Valanciunas at the 5. You have a bench of Kira Lewis Jr. and Devontae Graham, Najee Marshall, and Wenyen Gabriel, and Jackson Hayes and Willie Hernan-Gomez. Now, I don't really see New Orleans doing this trade. It really doesn't make them a ton better. CJ is a good ball handler, and he can create his own shot, which is something that the New Orleans Pelicans definitely could take advantage of. But they do have that in Brandon Ingram. He can also get his own shot. But CJ McCollum can definitely bring a good presence to the 1 with losing Lonzo Ball. But again, Brandon Ingram is young, and I just really don't see the point in moving on from him to get someone like CJ McCollum and Nasir Little. It also leaves their starting 3 slot a little iffy. Nasir Little was in and out of the rotation towards the end of the season. I just don't think he's ready to take the leap into the starting spot, and they really don't have anyone else they can throw there. So with that being said, I really don't see New Orleans doing this, but if they were off their rocker, then yeah, I think that this trade would be great for the Blazers, but not so great for New Orleans. On to the next one. Alright, and for this trade proposal, we have a 3-team trade between the Portland Trail Blazers, Dallas Mavericks, and Charlotte Hornets. In this trade, Portland receives Gordon Hayward, Dallas receives CJ McCollum, and the Hornets receive Kristaps Porzingis and a 2022 Dallas second-round pick. Now, for Portland, once again, roster doesn't change too much. You're still losing CJ McCollum, but you're bringing in Gordon Hayward. So you have the same starting lineups that I mentioned earlier, just Gordon Hayward inserted. So Dame at the 1, Norm at the 2, Gordon at the 3, Rocco at the 4, and Nurk at the 5 with the same bench basically. With this being said, I'm not a huge fan of this trade just because Gordon Hayward's injury prone, but I would prefer it over running a 3-guard lineup again. I do not like the 3-guard lineup. It's pretty small, but knowing that Portland will probably run it back, I do hope to be proven wrong. But with that being said, here's why I think Dallas would definitely want to do it. Now for Dallas, this is really a no-brainer. You get off Kristaps Porzingis' money, and that's important. They don't really seem to like him, and like the report said, he seems jealous of Luka Doncic, and it just seems like a toxic environment. You bring in CJ McCollum, who can take off some of the pressure from Luka and create his own shot, and you overall get better. I don't think Kristaps Porzingis made the team that much better just because he couldn't stay on the floor, and you bring in CJ, and you get some improvement there. And for Dallas, this is, like I said, really a no-brainer. Now for Charlotte, you'd be left with a starting lineup of LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, Kelly Oubre Jr., PJ Washington, and Kristaps Porzingis. I think that Charlotte would be kind of iffy on doing this deal. I don't think they're super attached to Gordon Hayward, and bringing in a big like Kristaps Porzingis could be interesting to see with LaMelo Ball. He can stretch the floor, and when he feels like it, run the rim. He's kind of been playing like a 7'3" small forward who has no lateral quickness lately, so I don't really know how much Charlotte would want to do this, but it could be something they'd want to experiment with since they're still in the early stages of building their roster. And now on to trade number 4. Alright, for this trade we have a 3-team trade between Portland, Boston, and Washington. Portland receives Jaylen Brown, Chris Dunn, Aaron Holiday. Boston receives Bradley Beal, CJ McCollum, Derrick Jones Jr., and Washington receives Al Horford, Marcus Smart, Anthony Simmons, a 2022 Portland top 10 protected, a 2022 Portland second round, a 2022 Boston second rounder, and a 2026 Boston second round. Realistically, now that I'm thinking about it, you definitely had to add in another first in there, maybe 2, just to get Washington to want to do this. I don't know if that'd be coming from Boston or Portland, but I think there'd definitely be another first to make that deal happen. Now for Portland, I think it's pretty obvious why you do this deal. You get a young forward / shooting guard in Jaylen Brown. He's got size, he's a great defender, and he can score the ball. Really improves your roster a lot. Brings a lot to the table that CJ doesn't with his defense. So your starting lineup would be Dame, Norm, Jaylen Brown, Rocco, and Nurk. And your bench would look a little different with Chris Dunn or Aaron Holiday running the backup 1. And then you got Tony Snell and Ben McLemore again. Nasir Little, whoever we signed with the MLE, and Tony Zeller. Now, I really think Portland should definitely do this trade if it's on the table, obviously. Jaylen Brown's really young, and I definitely think he'd be a great fit on this roster. Now for Boston. Now for this trade, I think Boston would improve a decent amount. You get CJ McCollum at your 1, Bradley Beal at your 2, Derrick Jones Jr. at your 3, Jason Tatum at your 4, and Robert Williams at your 5. Now, the only concern that I have with this trade is that they are a little weak at the center spot still. It seems to be a problem with Boston lately, and shipping out Al Horford doesn't help at all, but it's the only large contract that they could move in addition to Jaylen Brown. Now, I do think that the smaller backcourt of Dame and Bradley Beal would be a little bit interesting on defense, to say the least, but they could both score the hell out of the basketball, and I do really think that them and Jason Tatum could make a deadly trio. But with that being said, let's take a look at why Washington would do it. Now, the only reason that I could see Washington really wanting to do this is, well, not wanting to do this, it would be if Bradley Beal wanted out. They get a decent amount of picks in return, and like I said, you'd probably have to add a first or 2 in addition to the first I already included onto this trade in order to make them really want to do it. You take back a contract in Al Horford, and you get a young guard in Anthony Simmons, and Marcus Smart is a great player that you can use later on to trade if needed. you'd be able to develop your young guys around some vets, and I think that'd be really important. In addition to having new players like Kyle Kuzma and Montrezl Harrell, you'd definitely be turning a new leaf for this franchise and starting your rebuild with some vets around your young players in order to help them develop further. But I really do think that Washington would only do this trade if Bradley Beal asked out and said he wasn't going to re-sign. And if he isn't going to re-sign, you might as well get what assets you can out of it. Washington is loyal to Bradley Beal, and I do really think that they would send him where he wants to go. And I think where he wants to go is Boston to play with his friend, Jason Tatum. They've been lifelong friends, and it really makes sense for him to end up in Boston. Alright, so for this last trade, it's quite a doozy. We have a 4-team trade between Portland, Toronto, Indiana, and Philadelphia. Portland receives Pascal Siakam and TJ Warren. Toronto receives Nasir Little, Robert Covington, Justin Holiday, Isaiah Joe, a 2022 Portland top 10 protected pick, a 2023 Indiana lottery protected pick, a 2022 Portland second rounder, and a 2023 Portland second rounder. Indiana would receive Ben Simmons and Seth Curry, and Philadelphia receives CJ McCollum and Malcolm Brogdon. Now let's get into why Portland would do this. Now for this trade, Portland improves a ton. You get Damian Lillard at the 1, Norm at the 2, TJ Warren at the 3, Pascal at the 4, and Nurk at the 5. While TJ Warren isn't as good of a defender as Robert Covington, he can score the ball a lot better and has a lot more in his bag. Like we saw in the bubble, he can really explode. While we haven't seen him do much outside of the bubble in that regard, but like I said, still a great scorer. And then you got Pascal, who's an elite two-way player and really fills out the roster well. I definitely think that this trade improves Portland a ton, and also Pascal is a proven second option on a championship team, and I think him and Dame would mesh well together. And then TJ Warren, also, while he isn't the best defender, as I mentioned, he does have length on him, and that is a lot better than CJ McCollum, who is a shorter guard and running the 3-guard lineup, like I've reiterated so many times throughout this video, just won't bring you to a championship. Now for Indiana, you'd be left with a lineup of Seth Curry, Karis LeVert, Ben Simmons, Domantas Sabonis, and Miles Turner. I think this is a good squad to put around Ben Simmons. Seth Curry can shoot the rock. Karis LeVert is a great scorer. Miles Turner is a great stretch 5 who plays great defense. And Domantas Sabonis is kind of a unicorn, has a lot of tricks up his sleeve, can pass, shoots 32% from the 3, and plays alright defense from what I can tell. But overall, I do think this trade does improve Indiana. They do lose out on TJ Warren, but this would mainly be if they didn't want to pay TJ Warren in the upcoming offseason, especially if they're bringing in Ben Simmons and they want to retain Domantas Sabonis and Miles Turner eventually. So getting off TJ Warren's money, if they just don't really see him being there, I don't see that being a big deal for them. And they were already shopping Malcolm Brogdon, and that relationship seems to be kind of iffy, so this seems like a good deal for Indiana. Now for Toronto, they would be heading more in the direction of retooling and rebuilding their roster, getting off Pascal and getting a decent amount of picks in return, and then moving towards a younger core of Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, Scotty Lewis, and Chris Boucher. And then you also bring in Isaiah Joe, Nasir Little, and Justin Holiday. And you also did recently bring in Precious Achiuwa and Goran Dragic. So I see them probably trying to move off Goran Dragic in the near future, whether that be at the deadline or sooner. It just doesn't seem like he wants to be there that much, and it doesn't really fit their timeline from what I can tell. But you can flip him for some picks and maybe a young player, who knows. But with that being said, I do think that Toronto does get a lot younger with this trade, get some valuable young assets, and also the picks, which is what I think they would be more concerned about, in addition to moving on from Pascal Siakam. Now for Philadelphia, this is one of the more creative trades that you can get for Ben Simmons. You bring in CJ McCollum and Malcolm Brogdon to run your backcourt, which I think would be a great addition to their team. Both are willing to score the ball. Malcolm Brogdon plays great defense, and CJ McCollum can really create his own shot. You'd have Danny Green running the 3, who's an elite 3-and-D player, Tobias Harris, who's also a great scorer at the 4, and Joel Embiid holding it down in the paint. Now, I do think that this trade is definitely one of the better trades that Philly can get for Ben Simmons. I think that they're just shooting a little bit too high with their asking price. And I do think this improves their team a ton, but knowing Daryl Morey, you'll probably try and hold out on a superstar like Damian Lillard. I just don't think that's going to happen. But with that being said, I do think that Philadelphia would potentially do this deal if it was offered to them. It'd be hard to say no. If I was a GM, I would definitely say yes. Bringing in CJ McCollum and Malcolm Brogdon for Seth Curry and Ben Simmons seems like a improvement to me. Alright, and that concludes my video of 5 blockbuster trades I think the Portland Trail Blazers should make to keep Damian Lillard happy in Portland. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and please subscribe if you want to see more content from me, and also please leave a comment if you made it this far, and let me know what you thought about my trade proposals, if you think that they're realistic, which most of them, honestly, probably not going to happen, but it was fun to make this video anyways. So enjoy your day, and I hope to see you next time.